President Akinadeshina, thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to see you. Always, my brother. Anytime.
And I'd like to welcome everyone that's in the room, but also the tens of thousands of youth across Africa who are on social media, extremely excited about this particular initiative, which is about youth entrepreneurship and the challenges of energy and climate change in Africa. I personally am extremely excited. I think as youth on the continent, we're at a tipping point that if we create the right enabling environment, I truly do believe that the transformation of Africa's energy and climate challenges will be truly addressed. Mr. President, you and I are truly blessed. I think the fact that we have the ability and we have the influence to make a difference to the youth on the continent. However, having the ability and influence is unfortunately not enough. What it does require is a true belief and the passion. And this is why I would truly like to thank you. I think what you have exemplary leadership. You have truly shown that you are very passionate about the cause of youth, the whole chapter of youth. You really do believe that the youth are not the leaders of tomorrow, but the leaders of today. And you've demonstrated this in so many different ways. Our private conversations, your body language changes when we start talking about youth, and I think I wish and I pray that our continent has more leaders such as you who really do believe in this. And I think the fact that we are here today, there's so much going on. You have so many commitments, and yet you were really excited about this particular fireside chat says a lot. One of your high fives is all about youth, so thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Ashish. I think the appreciation is mutual. Young person who started your business when you were very young, one of the global leaders, you have a very successful entrepreneur, investing billions of dollars in Africa, and you are African. And I really think, when we talk about Africa's youth, I really think that that's really the energy of Africa. And I think the ideas and the creativity that Africa's youth have is really what's going to redynamize this continent. I actually said that as president of the African Development Bank, I will have a lot of conversation with African youth because that's really where the ideas are. That's where the innovation, creativity really is going to be. Now, when I take a look at the situation in Africa, you and I know, which really bothers me, it's that today we are essentially the youngest continent. 420 million people, right, between the age of 15 and 35 in Africa. And it's going to get even bigger, right? You look at 2050, that number is going to grow to about 850 million. Well, 850 million people, if we aren't creating jobs for them today, and we're not putting Africa in a position to create jobs for them for tomorrow, that means the unemployment level is going to keep rising. And the level of disenfranchisement is going to rise as well. And so is the level of frustration, right? You can't get jobs, and people get frustrated, and that creates a lot of social economic fragility. I don't think that even the economic headwinds that people talk about today is the real challenge that Africa faces. I think the real challenge that Africa faces is a jobs crisis for its youth. And I think that's why when I look at the situation, we're creating, you look at the number of youth in Africa today that actually have jobs, right? There are 140 million of them having some kind of jobs, right? I was talking to Aliko Dangote, and he had advertised for drivers in his company. And he told me that he got over 1,000 applications. But the person who was selected was somebody who had a PhD. What a waste of mind, right, to do that. So I think that's why we at the African Development Bank think that we need to tap into the greatest assets of this continent and put our money behind them. And that's why we launched this Jobs for Africa's Youth initiative with a goal of creating 25 million jobs for Africa's youth in 10 years. We don't need jobs in 25. And in any case, by 2070, I'll be dead. I won't be here. But I can change things right now. And I think the key is really to look at how we support them, their businesses, their ideas, their creativity. I want more of them being like you, right? Entrepreneurs like you, creating jobs not being job hunters, but actually being job creators. So it's very exciting. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. I think, when you think about the government and institutional frameworks and, how there's so many different initiatives taking place, particularly on energy and climate challenges, what are organizations such as Africa Development Bank particularly going to do to really harness these conversations to ensure that the collaborative conversation is taking place? I mean, you've seen it. I mean, we were at the World Bank together. You're highly regarded in all these circles. How are you making sure that these conversations are coming together?
I'm a firm believer in Africa developing with pride, which is Africa has the sharpest minds. Take those minds, support them, let them be the leaders. I want Africa to lead in the thinking. I want Africa to lead in the delivery in this energy space. Take some of the issues we have today. There's massive revolution going on with regard to renewable energy. But if you look at it, most of what you have that are big companies that are doing well in renewable energy space in Africa today, not many of them are actually run by Africans. And so what we want to do is we want to find African entrepreneurs that we can actually put resources behind, give them technical support, business advisory support. Now, what we're trying to do is really a program that is Africa-based, Africa-developed, Africa-inspired, and Africa-supported. I'm a big believer in the fact that, things shouldn't be done for Africans. Africans should figure out their own solutions. There are sharp minds here. During my opening address here, I showed you a young guy called Kevin Doe, who is just from Sierra Leone, 12-year-old guy. Lots of his mates are probably at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea today. But the guy's there. He developed his own batteries. He developed his own generator. He's firing everything in his own community. He has an FM station. He goes to MIT. He talks to MIT practitioners, talks to Nobel Prize winners, right? That's the kind of Africa I want. Sharpest mind in Africa, but we're going to put our resources behind them. How do we coordinate? We have to coordinate because, I really believe that we don't need too many splintered initiatives. We need to coordinate our efforts so we can harness how we reach out to the youth, how we support their entrepreneurship, and what type of resources we put behind them. But I must say we have to do things at scale. I'm a very impatient person when it comes to results. Very, very impatient for results. But I'm also excited about some of the things that I see some young people doing. When I was Minister of Agriculture in Nigeria, as you know, I love bow ties, so as you can see. I always said that the richest people in Africa are not going to come from the oil and gas industry. They're going to come from the agricultural sector. Why do I say that? Nobody drinks oil, and nobody smokes gas. But everybody eats food. But we're spending $35 billion importing it today. And if we do nothing by 2025, we'll be spending $110 billion. Think about it. If you are an agricultural entrepreneur and you are producing food, you are adding value to food, you'll be a billionaire in no time. And so we started this initiative with young people, getting them into agriculture. We called it Youth Employment in Agriculture Program, YIP, we called it. I was so passionate about it. You go to Nigeria today, things have changed. They are lawyers, they are engineers, they are architects. They are all into agriculture, and they are doing well because we made agriculture cool. Because the richest folks in the world are actually farmers, in case you'd like to know. And so I really think that we need to begin to tap into the resources we have and put our minds there and just develop African-based businesses that can unlock all of these potentials.
You're absolutely right. I think you touched on a particular point which is really interesting, that we need to find African solutions to African problems. I think trying to look outside to depend on this. An example you used about Laliko's driver situation was there's a big discussion around skills deficit, right? Now, we set up call centers in parts of Africa. And these call centers weren't available locally. There was no skills or talent available locally for these call centers. So everybody was outsourcing, all the telecom companies were outsourcing calls to parts of Asia. to India, to Philippines, to Vietnam. Yet, we have better accents on our continent. We have cheap connectivity with undersea cables and all of those other fundamentals. We put in a training program for 90 days, and all of a sudden, we started getting 65,000 job applications for 300 vacancies. And it just kind of showed you that building skills was not that big of a deal. Everybody's so hungry and willing to do it. And I think, you know, the other important angle, and I'd love your view on this, is that traditionally, we've seen governments, our governments, across the continent focus that the answer to unemployment is foreign direct investment or large projects. Whereas actually, it's really creating the ecosystem. It's nurturing small and medium enterprises in the true sense. When we talk about the ecosystem, you know, there's three key fundamentals. Obviously, education is important. I'm not the best advocate as a school dropout, but education is obviously very important. But informal education through mentorship is crucial. Our education system doesn't teach entrepreneurship. So when people come out of that system, who do they turn to for advice? So creating mentorship programs which actually can, you know, give the guidance, advice, handholding, and support to our entrepreneurs is crucial. Like Mara Mentor, which we run, which has 850,000 entrepreneurs across Africa today. But then the second part is access to capital. And access to capital is a crucial one that you and I have always spoken about, that, you know, getting banks to actually lend to businesses is an important angle. Creating more venture capital funds and seed funding projects and capabilities. And the third is public policy. Tweaking public policy to make sure that we are creating the right enabling environments for young entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs. Are you seeing this shift in mindset from governments? Do you think that now our governments have realized that this is a really, really critical piece? And how do we help them fast track that particular?
Well, you know, I think on the entrepreneurship side, you know, there is something to be said. I'm not sure how much education people need to become billionaires. But I look at you, you know, Bill Gates, you know, these are not dropouts. These are people whose brain are working so fast. They're actually creating a lot of stuff. You look at Zuckerberg, look at everybody else. Their mind is working at the speed of light. You know, they're looking at innovations of tomorrow. Right? And sometimes they are cluttered by the rigid systems that we have today. Let me say, look, in the future, the jobs of the future are really not going to come from the standard educational systems that we have. It's going to come from a new set of skills. And those set of skills will be in the digital side. You know, the capacity to, I mean, as I said in one of the meetings, that in the future, actually in the next future, you're saying, your next door neighbor in your office is going to be a robot. That's just the way it is. Everybody's going into artificial intelligence, robotics, and all of that. So I think our educational system has to move with the time. Now you are talking about policy change. Educational policy has to move with the time. We need to prepare our young people for the skills that the future needs. You know, we have to be competitive in science, in technology, in you know, engineering, in mathematics. You take a look, for example, today in Africa, at the total number of scientists we have, and compare ourselves to small countries like Finland or Denmark. Denmark, for example, has 10,000 scientists per 1 million people. Finland has 10,000 per 1 million people. The most we have in Africa is in South Africa. It's probably about 800. That's it. You look at us in terms of our innovation index, the capacity to be guys like people who will develop the you know, the things that are transformative stuff, right? It's based on your ability to be creative and have patents for stuff, right? You look at the US Patent Office. You've got roughly about 247,000 patents every year that are actually put there, right? In Africa, we have about maybe 300 of those that are there. Over 92% of that is coming from OECD countries. And so what I'm saying is that the world is changing so fast. We've got to make sure that, you know, I love literature. I love all those things. But I'm sorry, I don't see many people out there that want to hire somebody that did Latin or did classics, right? You were just talking about, the outsourcing, business outsourcing model. You want people who are where the market needs it. They want computer scientists. They want techies. They want programmers. They want all those. That's where it is. And so we've got to also help our young people to move into those areas, right? And so I really think that entrepreneurship, it's really critical. Within this program that we are talking about, we want to build entrepreneurship. We want to support them. And I'm glad with what you are doing. You're phenomenal with the Mara work that you're doing. I see others like Tony Olumelu, your friend, also doing great work with the Tony Olumelu Foundation and all of that. And guys like you also make Africa develop with pride. And I'll tell you why. I started early in my career, I worked for Rockefeller Foundation, right? And when I worked in Rockefeller Foundation, how did Rockefeller make money? They were business people. You take a look at Carnegie Corporation. They make Kellogg's Foundation. They made people. And so the Africa's billionaires and multimillionaires like yourself and others are doing the right thing in investing your money into foundations. You're using your monies to develop and tap into creativity and energy of our young people. I want to commend you, and I think Africans, billionaires, should not be putting their monies out of Africa. They should invest their money in unlocking the creativity of the minds of Africa's youth, because that's where the greatest benefit will come from.
You're absolutely right. I think that's such an important point. And I think it's so easy for the private sector to sit out of this and kind of point and expect the public sector to do all of this. But you're right, Tony, Aliko, all these guys and the foundations that are coming up across the continent. We need the private sector to truly step up to the mark and play its role as well, because we cannot just depend on the public sector. The one big shift in narrative, which, to your point, you are impatient and you're the most energetic and passionate person that I know who can actually make it happen. It's having the energy, but it's then having the execution capabilities which matters. I've been personally concerned about a bit of a shift in narrative where we kind of get carried away with the marketing of, bringing Silicon Valley to Africa. And I love the theme of it. I love the thought of bringing Silicon Valley to Africa. But I was at the World Economic Forum in Kigali, and I went to the university to speak to our youngsters, and one of them actually asked me, he said, if I want to be successful, do I have to go to the United States? And it made me starting to realize that what we're doing is we're actually pitching an American theme that we're trying to bring into Africa. And that's why I kind of said that we really do need to shift the narrative, that it's not bringing Silicon Valley to Africa. Our focus, and that's exactly what you're doing, which I'd love to hear a little bit more about, is that how do we shift the focus, that how do we take Africa to Silicon Valley? How do we create the local innovation that we require? To your point, that all this innovation that's coming up, this IP, we need to create the protection for all these kind of innovation that we can actually create the patenting of, across the continent, creating the access to capital, creating the ability to make them feel comfortable and confident that they've got the support structures and systems around them. And I think that the fact that you have all our countries across the continent, and for all the right reasons, you've got such a lot of respect across the continent, that how do we start making sure that our governments start changing this narrative too, that let's not get carried away with creating these themes of bringing things from outside to in. How do we take inside to out? And just, finally touching on our mentor, I've now become the chairman of the UN's Global Entrepreneurs Council, and we're used to global initiatives coming to Africa. And what's amazing is I'm actually meeting the Prime Minister of India next week. We're in July launching our mentorship platform in Sweden, in Jordan, in the UAE, and in India as well. So it's now an African initiative which is going global. It's kind of a way to demonstrate to our youth that we have the frameworks. We don't need global multilaterals to just help us. We're kind of creating the passion. I have never heard of an initiative which is committing to create 25 million jobs. That's huge. And it's self-sustainable, right? You're going to create that in a self-sustainable manner. You're not going to be subsidizing this. You're going to create the frameworks to enable these jobs to be created. So I'd love your views and thoughts.
Oh, thanks. You know, when you take a look at the Silicon Valley, how did it really happen? The first critical thing there is you've got a university like Stanford University that's there. And all these universities produce a lot of well-trained people in computer sciences, in other areas of high tech, and so on. And then you find that, literally, many of them started leaving early instead of completing their universities, and they go and start their own private ventures. And then venture capitalists looked at them and said, well, look, these guys are doing some really fantastic stuff. Start putting money around them. And then even the curriculum of the university started changing to allow, and that's how Silicon Valley developed. Because you can't develop innovation in a vacuum. You need knowledge creation centers that stimulates the creativity of the mind, right, to look at breakthrough technologies and innovations. So for me, really, it's not about taking Africa out into Silicon Valley. It's, if I borrow your own, your Masa Mara, create a Mara Valley, here, close to universities, centers of excellence. We've got right now in Africa actually a very good initiative, which is African, I think it's the Institute or Foundation for Applied Mathematical Sciences. Now, it's not as far out as you may think, but these guys are doing a lot of things that can help you in prosthetics. You applied sciences. It's very, very important. So what I would like to see is first-rate institutions that enables people to be creative, innovate. Then you create enabling environment where companies come into because they want to tap into that creativity. And you have young people that can be either on their own and create their own business, or they have the skills that the companies need that will hire them. So the problem we have right now is that you have a number of companies that are coming to Africa. They're looking for managers, but we give them people with labels. Masters in this, and bachelors in that. That's okay. But they're looking for whether they have the competencies they need. So that's why within the Jobs for Africa's Youth initiative that the African Development Bank is launched at this annual meeting, we're working on something called Skills Enhancement Zone. It's going to be quite transformative. What exactly does it mean? You got industry, and you have young folks that are coming out of universities. Okay, we want them to go through these industrial zones, that they can actually be exposed to skill sets across different types of industries, whether it's pharmaceutical industry, healthcare industry, financial industry, whether it is ICT industry or agricultural industries. Over a period of about 6 months, you pick up actual skills. Right? And then from there, you can decide, I want to be a standalone person because I want to create my own business. And then we are mobilizing through that facility, a facility to support the ideas. We're going to work with other partners to mobilize $5 billion towards that. It's not just the bank. We're working with several other partners to be able to do that. And so those ones that want to have their own ideas, of course, then business incubators, support facilities will support them. We have something called the Boost Africa Investment Fund. And this Boost Africa Investment Fund we're doing with the European Investment Bank, which will actually be private equity funds that will be outside of the African Development Bank that will support just businesses of young people on the continent. And so, but if you want to get employed, then the employers will say, oh, gee, my goodness, these guys have the skills we need. And then they can employ from these skills enhancement zones, right? So it gives you a labor market entry. And at the same time, it reduces the search cost of the companies looking for who to hire. You go to some countries. I mean, when I was in Nigeria as minister, I remember there was an advertisement came from the immigration service. For 1,000 jobs, 1 million people applied. Right? And you're just applying for a government position. How much are they going to pay you? Right? It's better to actually get your creative juices, have funds around yourself, create your own businesses. You make a lot more money that way than actually going to kind of line up in the street for somebody just to, how much are they going to pay you anyway for your life, right? So I really just want to say that we want young people in Africa being job creators, not job hunters.
You know, to that and to complement that, I think financial institutions need to really also change gears. I started business, as you know, when I was 15 with $5,000 20 years ago, and no bank would give me a loan. I would shave early so I look older. I would try and put on a deeper voice. I'd wear a suit. I actually wore a tie, and it still wouldn't work.
Is that why you stopped wearing ties?
That's why I stopped.
You walk sometimes.
And I stopped shaving as well, as you can see. No, but the point is, I think, you know, the model for financial services on our continent has been that banks take customers' deposits, they put it into government treasury, they make 1,000 to 1,200 basis point spreads. They're making such 10, 12% margins by just putting it into government treasury. Why do they need to lend to businesses? And there's two things in this. Firstly, if you believe in the continent the way we do, those spreads are not going to exist down the line because our continent is going to mature. Those spreads are definitely not going to be there. And secondly, who lends to our businesses, our SMEs? The global multinationals are taken care of by the global banks. There's Chinese banks that are set up, and there's Chinese staple financing coming in for the Chinese companies that are here. What happens to our SMEs? And this is why we need to create more banks for business that actually start lending to SMEs, doing more on that front. And I know that the Africa Development Bank is also kind of supporting these initiatives to ensure that there's more SME lending going out to youth and to women. And I think that's what needs to happen. The fact that our continent leapfrogged in mobile telephony and then created mobile money, which has become a global phenomenon. I mean, 48% of Kenya's GDP is pumped through mobile money. But it's still telecom operator-led. It needs to become financial institution-led, and it needs to become mobile banking. That's the kind of innovation, and as Atlas Mara, our bank across the continent, is doing exactly that, and we need a lot of other banks to start stepping up to that and becoming innovative in that respect. Final question, just changing gears a little bit, but SDGs being approved, COP21, there's a lot of emphasis and focus on all the climate change, energy issues, and Africa, thanks to leaders such as yourselves, are really on the center stage and taking this extremely seriously, which hasn't been seen before. Why is that happening now? Why is all of those initiatives and that energy being focused on these types of initiatives right now?
Well, thanks. You know, first on the issue of the finance before I talk of the development things. You know, there's nothing greater than trying to find diamonds in the rough, right? Many people pass by gold, and they think gold is dirt, right? Take a look at Bill Gates, right? When he was developing his innovations and all of that, walks into IBM, tells them, well, I think the future of the world is going to be in laptops, you know, home-based systems. In an era where everybody, you know, when they tell you it's a computer lab, it's as big as this. The computer itself is like a building, right? That was the era in which he was talking. Well, they said, okay, well, pay him whatever amount of money that, you know, for his programs and all his great ideas. But the chairman of IBM said there is no future for a laptop or home-based computer. This is the future. How wrong? It's listed as one of the worst business decisions ever made. You know, when you've got to see beyond and see when people have creative ideas, you need funds to allow them to incubate it. You are talking about mentors. We need ways in which we connect them to mentors like you and others who have actually tried various ideas. You know, because not all of them are going to work. But where is that Ashish Takane? Where is that Aliko Dangote? Where is Olumelu? Where is the Bill Gates and all the others? Where is the Mo Ibrahim next one going to come from, right? That's what we really have to be looking at. That's why, for us, you know, we really think that that's why we actually focus, part of our investment in this area also is to help to pay. We're going to make debt investment with commercial banks to take care of issues of student loans. Because if you're going to go into vocational training, you're going to, post-university or whatever, you need access to financing, some monies to do that. If you don't have work, how are you going to get retrained, right? So we also are thinking of ways in which, how can we be more flexible, working with our commercial institutions to help our young people that may want to upgrade, they may want to retool, and show some confidence in them. Of course, you are 15. They probably thought you were crazy. You should have been in school or something. But if a young person goes to our banks today, say, I have a business idea, and you are 21 years old, they'll ask you for tax receipts for the last 40 years, right? And they say, if you can produce the tax receipt for the next 40 years, you can come back. Past 40 years, you can come back. No, I think we need to look beyond the commercial banks. I think we need to have private equity funds, specially set aside venture capital funds that will support the creativity of young entrepreneurs in Africa. I think that's really where it's going to be. I don't see it coming out of commercial banks, just like you. They didn't lend you the money, but look at you today, you're a billionaire, right? And so I think that this is where that is really going to come from. But also we need to de-risk the financial markets for lending to young people. And that's where we, as a multilateral development bank, can actually do something about that. Let me tell you one of the things that really gets me about young people with a sense of, let me say, drive. As president of the African Development Bank. 2 weeks before I took over my job as president of the bank, I felt there was one place I needed to go. Because you have to, in this position, you have to have a moral compass, right? You have to be quite focused, because for me, I don't take the position of president of African Development Bank. It's not just a job. It's a mission to transform Africa through our institution by working with others, right? And so I went in there to Gorée in Senegal, which is where they used to take slaves, and they put them all into boats and ship them out. And President Macky Sall was quite generous to allow them to take me there so that I could see it. So as I went over there, I stood in that door. There's a door there. They call it a door of no return. I stood there. They said, this is the place where all the slaves, when they threw them out of here, that's it. It's called a door of no return. And then I asked myself, you've got lots of people, young people, that had a hope of future, they had energy. They were taken out of here as slaves and thrown right into those boats, and they were gone against their will. So I started talking to them about the fact that we are African Development Bank, but emphasize that part that says development. And how can we say we are developing, and we got 140 million youths in Africa that are vulnerably employed? We can only create in Africa 3 million jobs. The demand for jobs is probably about 12 million per year. No, we've got to change that. And that's how we started working about that. Because as a development bank, you're not there making money, right? You're there actually creating opportunities for future growth and development for others, inclusive growth. That's what we are. And so that's how we actually were doing this. Anyway, you get a sense of what drives me, because I don't believe the future of Africa's youth lies at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea. I think it lies in some kind of an Africa that is more prosperous, that's able to create jobs and actually create quality jobs with dignity. And when you talk about all of what everybody is doing on the SDGs, I really salute the great efforts of UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, President Hollande and others that worked on the COP21 to deal with issues of climate change, and also the financing for development. All of these things are coming together. Why are they coming together? 3 factors. First, we have a situation today where if we do not deal with the jobs crisis that we have. Look, terrorists are recruiting them by the day. You have a lot of problem with social instability and political instability. Just look at the Arab Springs. So when people say, oh, well, you know, fragility is coming because of economic headwinds, no. Fragility will come because of job crisis. And that's why at the African Development Bank, we are very passionate about the energy of lighting up Africa. A young person has a mobile phone, right? He or she wants to be able to use that mobile phone. They want to do all kinds of, in fact, I can't even keep up with the things they do on this thing. Yeah. My sons have to keep telling me, Dad, you know, you are 5 years behind because we've gone into this, you know. And, but we can't do that without electricity. You can't have a good quality of life without electricity. So I think there is a sense of urgency of making sure that we have inclusive growth, a sense of urgency of realizing that there's a link between infrastructure development, energy development, job creation, entrepreneurship, financing, you know, and a more stable and inclusive world for all of us. That's why you see everybody actually doing quite a lot of this, you know. But my own plea is that we've got to just move now into implementing and executing stuff at scale. There's no time to waste, really. We've got to execute. The young people are impatient, and they should hold everybody accountable, because people keep saying the future belongs to the youth, future belongs to the youth. You see a lot of people that are telling them that, you know, are the ones still saying the position they are 80 years old, but they say, you know, the future belongs to the youth. Anyway.
So before I hand over to you for the closing remarks, I want to make two statements. Firstly, Mara turns 20 years old in August. As a reflection point, we've set a lot of targets for the group for the next 5 years, for the foundation for the next 5 years. One of my personal targets is to, within the next 5 years, so don't rush me, but my personal target in the next 5 years is to look as sharp as my older brother. I think he's the most well-dressed man in Africa. So I want to learn how to tie a bow tie from you within the next 5 years. My second point is, I think, speaking on behalf of President Adesina and the leaders on the continent from the public sector and the private sector, I think the message to the youth is we are going to leave no one behind. And I think that is a really important message, which I know you're extremely passionate about, I am, and many leaders from both the public sector and the private sector. So once again, thank you, President Adesina.
Well, thank you very much, Ashish. You're doing great things. Africa is very proud of you. I'm extremely proud of you. I think you are a great role model for young people in Africa, and you build global businesses. That's what we want people to do. But not only that, you give back, and you're doing quite a lot. So thank you very much for that. And just to the young people that are here, young folks that are here, and those that are actually also tweeting and doing all kinds of things around, you know, let me just assure you that when we're developing this Jobs for Africa's Youth, we ask ourselves the question, we're not going to develop this sitting down in the bank. We're going to have to go out there and ask the young people what they think. We can't develop it for them. They have to develop it for themselves. And so the strategy was actually developed that way. We had a lot of town hall meetings with young people in different parts of Africa, you know, asking them what they think, the ideas. It's actually quite amazing, the kind of ideas that they have. So that's what influenced what we do. So why am I saying this? At the African Development Bank, our logo says, building today a better Africa tomorrow. And that better Africa tomorrow is actually the young folks that are here, that are listening. So what we've got to do is to build them today. And when we build them today, then that better Africa tomorrow is going to happen. And so I make the commitment that, you know, we're going to arrange. I will have a lot more town hall meetings like this with you and others. We've got to create hope. We've got to create opportunities. We've got to make our young people feel that they participate in that life is not passing them by, and that African Development Bank, which is Africa's premier bank, listens to them and actually has programs that address their own needs. And that's the kind of bank that I want us to always be. So thank you very much, and I look forward to another engagement.